This is the Uptick Newswire Stock Day podcast, sponsored by InvestorsHangout.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes, Google Play, and YouTube to stay up to date on penny stock news and interviews, public information on OTC, pink sheets, and microcap stocks from around the world, with your host, Everett Jolly.
On today's show, I have a returning guest, and I'm really excited to have him back on the show because I think they're going to be turning the corner here in the second and third quarter. We're talking no other than first Cobalt Corp. They trade on the OTCQB under the ticker symbol FTSSF. I think they're completely undervalued here, around 69.70 cents American money. And with us today to talk about possibly his new acquisition is the CEO of the company, Trent Mell. Trent, welcome back to the show.
Everett, thank you. Always a pleasure.
You know, March 15th, you guys put out a press release. You're looking to acquire U.S. Cobalt. Where are we at in that process?
We are at a point now where the board of U.S. Cobalt has recommended approval, and they've got their meeting materials out to their shareholder so that they can have a vote in about just under 30 days' time to get the deal done. On our side, we've got board approval, and we don't need a vote. So we're in those final innings, and these tend to be tough innings in the trading perspective. On the one hand, as you pointed out, there's a great value play because when you're doing a share deal like this, the stock tends to get beaten up a little bit as people trade in and out. And as I know from experience, that once the deal gets approved and done, typically that's a great opportunity to re-rate. So I'm kind of ignoring the screen and ignoring the stock price and focusing on the story. We love what we're doing. And I think we've got a very unique story in the cobalt market to tell.
You know, last time you were on the show back in January 20th here in 2018, we talked about your $25 million placement. You're going to take some of that money, and is that how you're going to finance that deal?
Well, in this, we're going to finance it by taking that money, like we'll finance the asset, by putting that money into the ground. And so in this particular instance, neither of us is cash flowing yet. We're both exploration and developing companies. And so the idea is to do an all-share transaction. Preserve the money for where it's needed. And so, you know, what we're doing and the vision here, if your listeners were to go onto our website, we've got a great slide summarizing our vision. And our vision is really being the go-to North American cobalt producer. We've got a big land package, 50 past producing lines in Ontario. We've got the only permitted cobalt refinery in North America that can produce battery materials. And now with this transaction, we've got a really attractive footprint into the USA, in Idaho, and this Iron Creek project that we're going to be folding in, I think has an opportunity to advance fairly quickly towards production with a little bit more work and investment on our part.
Well, you surely can find cobalt all over the world in different countries. Why North America? What makes that so attractive?
Yeah, so when you look at where cobalt's coming from today, 60% of it's coming out of the DRC. And of course, there's a risk-off trade on nobody likes the Congo right now. Beautiful geologically, but you know the politics are tough. And the sad reality is when you look at where cobalt is coming from 3 and 4 years from now, 75% is coming out of the DRC. So we started looking at where else in the world do you find it? Canada was attractive, and we know the U.S. is as well. When you contrast what you have in Ontario to say the other big exploration jurisdiction right now, Australia. So forget the DRC. Africa's tough. Then you go to Australia, they tend to be very low-grade deposits. So DRC, you've got kind of 0.3, 0.4% cobalt in these mines. Australia, it's an order of magnitude lower at about a 0.1. And these tend to be low-grade, very expensive nickel laterite projects, so kind of these billion-dollar projects with very complex metallurgy. So we shied away from Australia because they're long, big, complex projects. When you go to North America on a relative basis, they tend to be smaller, high-grade projects that are frankly quicker to put into production. Iron Creek, for instance, would be an underground deposit rating. If everything's economic and we do our work, this could be a sort of a 0.5% cobalt grade. And when you start looking at the grades you get in the Idaho Cobalt Belt, one, you got a primary cobalt mine because you've got copper as the byproduct instead of the other way around, which is very unusual. And because these things have good continuity and good grade and decent mineralization, and you're in a first world country. There's just so many advantages in terms of mining and processing this stuff, and then using the refinery in Canada to then produce battery materials, which in turn gets sold right back into the North American market, likely the U.S., whether it be the automotive sector or a Google, a Tesla gigafactory, or what have you. There is no production in North America right now of this nature, and so the vision here is mine it, process it, and sell it all back into the U.S. and you've got a really unique story.
March 22nd, you put out a press release in NI 43101. What's that pertaining to?
Yeah, so that 43101 report on our Ontario properties, it just really speaks to the prospectivity. So when we compare the two assets, the Idaho project that we're buying and the Ontario one we have, Idaho has a historic estimate of content, a historic resource. So, estimate of what the content is in cobalt and copper and grades and so forth with tonnages. And that one, I think we're well on track in terms of growing the size of this resource, and we'll keep doing that over the next year. And then you're on the path to permitting and building the mine. In Ontario, we've got 50 past producers. We've got a little bit more work to do to figure out where that resource is going to come from. But we've got 3 or 4 active targets right now. And the nature of the prize in the Ontario camp is much, much bigger. So we've got something that's a little bit more certain in Idaho and a little less certain in Ontario. But the torque you can get out of success in Ontario could be very attractive. So we're kind of balancing the risk reward with these portfolio of assets. And again, being in the same continent, there's good synergies to be had between them.
There's been a lot of talk about cobalt and different aspects of it, and definitely different grades of it. Prices have went up exorbitant here in the last 12 months. What is your strategic value of First Cobalt Refinery?
Well, the refinery is hard to come by. If you're a smaller company, a small explorer, developer, or even a producer in the base metals world, very often you start out life producing what we call a concentrate material. So you get your material out of your mine, and you break it up, you run it through your mill, and you've got a semi-finished good. You've got a product that then needs to be further upgraded at a smelter and or a refinery, depending on what you're ultimately producing. And so for a company of our size to have their hands on a facility that can produce final, in this case, battery-grade material, gives you a distinct advantage. And I would add to that the fact that we've got the permits to produce a lot of arsenic ores makes it particularly unique, because when you look at cobalt across North America, just a reality of the geology that it's found in is you've got a lot of arsenic. And the idea of trying to permit an arsenic treatment facility anywhere across North America today would likely set you back many years from the permitting process. And the fact that we've got this thing permitted and that it's a facility been on care and maintenance for 3 years now just allows us to find our way to production much faster than if we did not have this facility, not to mention the cost of building it.
My guest today is Trent Mell. He is the president and CEO of First Cobalt Corp. Well, they trade on the OTCQB under the ticker symbol FTSSF. Like I said, I feel that they're undervalued here under 70 cents American money. Before I let you go, can you give me a little bit of your macro outlook for a company, and when do you think that revenues will actually fall on the balance sheet? Sure.
So, the macro outlook, it has to start with electric vehicles. And I like to remind people on this side of the world that electric vehicles, we're only really starting to turn our minds to it here in North America. In China, it's a reality,
yep.
and it's the future. It's the future of their technology. It's the future for fighting pollution and so forth. And we're getting there with Tesla, but there are 100 other manufacturers with EV technologies that are slowly being rolled out. And over the next 18 months, we're going to see a lot of options come out on the market. And yet, as we sit here today, we've got a 1% vehicle penetration rate in an EV form. And so you don't need to stretch your imagination too far, 2%, 3%, 5%, to get bullish on cobalt, because we are already today in a deficit situation in world supply. And so we need more. We can't get to 10 or 20% today, and companies like ours are trying to fill that gap. So it really starts and finishes there for me. Is you have a constructive outlook. You know the price is going to be there, so we are incented to go out and find the resources. And candidly, I think the investors are going to back our efforts as we need capital to move these things to production.
And when do you think we'll actually start processing some revenues on the balance sheet?
Well, it probably, optimistically, you could maybe see your way there in 3 years' time. It's going to be a function of drilling and permitting and building. The important thing is the value creation opportunity here and the discovery. How big is this thing going to be? We've got a historic resource of 1.3 million tons of cobalt, and I think the real short-term opportunity here to create value for shareholders is going to be to see if we can double or triple that through our drilling and exploration activity. So that's the focus. And then once you get a handle on how big it is, then you can go down the path of permitting and building it out.
Company that we're highlighting today here on Stock Day is First Cobalt Corp, trade on the OTCQB under the ticker symbol FTSSF. And with us today is the CEO of the company, Trent Mell. Trent, I want to thank you for coming on the show. In closing, is there anything that we didn't get a chance to touch upon that you would like to illustrate out there to the listeners?
Well, in the commodity space, we are very much a cyclical industry. So as you start looking at the trading patterns of companies, there are some real obvious entry points. There's risk off, risk on periods in commodities, and I'd say we're in a risk off one right now. So, if you're attentive enough to your screens, you'll see some really attractive points where you can pick up some commodities at an attractive price. But having done that, you still got to make a judgment on the management team, the quality of the asset that comes with it, along with, of course, your timing.
Well, you guys are doing a really good job out there. I really do appreciate you coming on the show. I wish you nothing but continued success. Hopefully you'll come back on the show in 40 or 50 days and give us an update.
Yeah, we'd love to. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
This program is entirely sponsored and produced by Uptick Newswire, LLC, which is responsible for the content. The opinions and information provided on this program are those of the guests and those of the respective companies they represent, and do not necessarily reflect those of the staff or management of Uptick Newswire. Uptick Newswire encourages all listeners of this program to do their due diligence and research when determining investment strategies that will work for them, or to seek the assistance of an investment professional. The guests of this program may have paid for its distribution and are not directly affiliated with Uptick Newswire or this station.